that's kind of my mindset right now. Is like, I get to do this. I get to go out and put on a great performance April 12th in Miami. I'm just excited, man. I'm grateful, and I'm gonna go out there and have some fun. I think what initially drew me to MMA was just growing up in Hawaii. You know, fighting was part of our culture. In high school at the time, BJ Penn was the champion, Hawaiian champion. And just seeing someone come from a small town of Hilo to becoming the UFC champion, best in the world, you know, I think it gave a lot of us, you know, up-and-comers, just gave us hope. You know, it sparked a dream in a lot of kids, including myself. And so I decided to start wrestling in high school. I started late. You know, a lot of people start when they're 4 or 5 years old. I started late. I placed in high school. I got 6th place in states. And then from there, I was like, you know, I want to keep going at this. I was doing a little training, a little jiu-jitsu on the side. I decided to go continue my wrestling career. I wrestled in college for 2 more years. And then after that, I was like, you know, screw this. Like, I didn't wrestle long enough to like probably be good at wrestling, but I really want to fight. So I came back home one summer and I took an MMA fight. I fought someone with the same last name as me. His name was Micah Ige, and I finished him in the first round, maybe 30 seconds, 40 seconds in. And that feeling I got from that fight and just the adrenaline, the nerves going into the fight and then winning was like the best feeling of the world. I'm sure every fighter can relate. And ever since then, it's just, you know, been that constant chase to find that feeling again. And that's when I knew exactly what I wanted to do.
What has been the toughest moment of your career so far, and how did you overcome that?
One of the toughest moments of my career was when I fought Jordan Griffin in Milwaukee. You know, I feel like it was a fighter I was supposed to go out there and beat and dominate. And at the time, I was just facing a lot, you know, in my personal life. I was mentally burnt out. I was physically burnt out. And, but I was doing everything I can to chase my dream and do everything right. And I just wasn't there. I wasn't right mentally. And I remember waking up I had a great weight cut and everything. I remember waking up that morning. It was just like the worst day to have a fight. And I remember having to overcome those demons and overcome that adversity of just not feeling well, physically, mentally, spiritually. Just was not connected with myself. And there was no way I could go text Dana and be like, hey, can we move this date? Because I was there, I was prepared. And I remember going into that fight and I had a lot of success and I almost finished him in round 1. And when I didn't get that finish, I really felt that, I don't even know if you call it an adrenaline dump, but I just felt a full body fatigue. And it was the worst feeling you could ever have in a fight. My heart rate was skyrocketed. And I remember coming out in round 2, I was exhausted. And I pretty much laid on my back for the whole round. And went back to the stool in round 3. And, you know, Eric was yelling at me. Everyone was yelling like we had to win this round. And that 5 minutes is what defined, you know, everything. My grit, my tenacity, just who I am as a person. I was able to find that and dig deep and win the final round. And I think just winning on your absolute worst day has helped me and define my career, that I can overcome anything. You know, I always think back to maybe going into a future fight. If I feel that way, I'd be like, I've done this before. I know how to overcome. I learned a lot about myself that day. And I'd say that's definitely one of my most career defining moments. And explains a lot about who I am as a person, because no one gets to see that. No one gets to feel what I feel. No one knows what I've been through going into the fight. All they see is, did I get my hand raised or did I lose? And that day I was able to go in there, battle my demons, and get my hand raised.
So if you had to pick one fight that best represents who you are as a fighter, which one would you pick?
A fight I forget about sometimes that I would say defines me as a fighter is the Mirsad Bektic fight, when I fought Mirsad Bektic in Houston. This kid was really good, man. At the time, people were talking about him like he was going to be the next UFC champion. And I remember he just had that kind of cockiness and chip on his shoulder. And I remember he took his shirt off at media day and was flexing. I was like, dude, it's media day. He was flexing on me. And the next day, weigh-ins, I remember just getting in his face and like staring into his soul. And I was like, this is my house, Kimosabe. And fight day came along, and I had to go in there and just show him who was the boss. And I put it on him. I was very sharp-minded and just poised and aggressive, like a very controlled aggressiveness in round one. And I felt like that round one of that fight defines me as a fighter. Round two, I did let off a little bit. I found that was a learning moment for me. It was like how to control that flow state and that controlled aggression. But it was like I like to think of it like a cat playing with his food. I kind of was playing with my food and let him back into the fight when I didn't have to. But that's definitely a fight I could look back at. And when you watch round one of Mirsad Bektic fight, that's definitely Dan Ige.
You stepped in on a few hours' notice to fight Diego Lopes at UFC 303. Have you noticed more of a respect in the MMA community since that fight?
Yeah, I think taking that fight against Diego Lopes earned me some respect that can never be taken back. It was something that no one's ever done. People talk about it all the time. People say they're ready. But when the call really comes, are you actually ready? And that was a big one for me, to go in there and show up the day of the fight. That morning I woke up, I had no idea I was fighting. I trained, I worked out, I saunaed, I was getting a massage, I was recovering, I was getting ready for Monday, just relaxing. And they called me, it was about 4 p.m. and luckily I had all my medicals done and I got to show up and go put out. And I felt like I put on a good show. I went out there and gave my best and finished strong. And nearly finished him, broke him in the third round, and definitely earned some respect from that one.
How do you see the fight going between him and Volk on the same card?
He's been on the rise. He's definitely earned a shot. He's stepped up to a lot of fights that maybe people didn't want to take at the time, and he's been the guy to do it. And he's been when you catch that hot streak, you got to ride it all the way. I was once on that path, and good for him. He's earned it. He's got a very tough fight. He's fighting for the title against Alex Volkanovski, and that's going to be an amazing fight. How do I think it goes? Diego Lopes he's strong, he's aggressive, he hits hard, but I feel like if he doesn't hurt Volk in the first 2 rounds, then Volk's just going to take over that fight. And he's very smart. He's a very tactic-based fighter. He knows how to game plan well and put it on his opponent. His gas tank's incredible, and I just see Volk getting that title back.
When you look at your upcoming opponent, Sean Woodson, where do you find success?
Sean Woodson's he's an interesting guy. 6'3", that's super tall for the division. Where do I see my success is, I look back at Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was always a shorter guy. Get inside, land big shots. Rip his body. This is MMA. I don't have to go out there and stay long and have a kickboxing fight with this guy. I could take him down. I could strike with him. I could do everything I want to do as long as I fight on my terms, and I see myself being victorious.
Looking back at your recent fights, what lessons have you learned, and how have they influenced your approach for this upcoming fight?
It's crazy. Every fight, there's a learning lesson, and there's never not a learning lesson. Even going into my last fight, or after my last fight, there was a lot of takeaways of just camp and preparation and peaking and burnout. Going into the Bryce Mitchell fight, there was, or after the fight, there's things I learned about myself as far as urgency. So sometimes you're almost too calm, too composed, and you don't have that urgency. But in a 3-round fight, you need the urgency. So there's takeaways from that. Again, the Mirsad Bektic fight, round 1, sharp, fierce, ferocious. Round 2, lazy. It's making every second and every moment count, being in position at all times, and just giving my best effort. And the biggest thing is having fun, convincing yourself, like, dude, this is the fun part. Fighting is the fun part. We grind, we put our bodies through the ringer day in, day out for the whole year to get to fight. and we don't have to fight. We get to fight, and it's having that mindset and that attitude of and being grateful for what we get to do. And that's kind of my mindset right now. Is like, I get to do this. I get to go out and put on a great performance April 12th in Miami. I'm just excited, man. I'm grateful, and I'm gonna go out there and have some fun.
After a victory at UFC 314, what are your goals for the remainder of the year?
314 is a big one. It's a big card. I got a tough opponent in Sean Woodson. But essentially my goal is to get 3 big wins again. Doesn't matter who, doesn't matter where, doesn't matter when. I want to get 3 big names, or not even big names, sorry, 3 big wins. And I say big wins because every win's a big win. And get some respect back on my name. I want people, I'm not looking at rankings, I'm not looking at titles, I don't care who's the champ, I don't care who's the #1 contender. I just want to go out there, get 3 big wins, and put myself back in that picture.
Our slogan at Engage is "We are all fighters." What do you fight for?
I agree. We are all fighters, and I fight for my family. I fight because God given me this talent, and I'm using my talents wisely. And I fight for my legacy.